Well, welcome to Charlie Crimebuster's Crime Talk with James Buckland, our producer. We're going to talk today about our last episode that we just dropped on Charlie Crimebuster, entitled Karen Reed, Cop Killer, or Cop Girlfriend. And we're going to try to decide that in this series that we're involved in today.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Hey, James, did you have a good Labor Day?
I did, and how about yourself?
Had a great one. Man, I'm telling you, we just, of course, this last weekend when we dropped this last episode was right the day before Labor Day. And what happened to this summer, man?
It is gone.
By, right?
Yeah, it is gone. Here we are in the fall already.
I know. I remember when, I was a kid in school and I could not wait until that summertime came. And it just seemed like it was so long and wonderful vacation. But boy, I just don't know what happened to it. We just flew right through it. Had a lot of crazy things happening this summer. We had the attempted assassination of the former president, and
right.
Had a lot of trials going on, including this one we're talking about today. There was a lot of activity on this particular case. But let me say to those folks who just joined us on our YouTube channel, thank you for being a part of it. We would like to encourage you to take a look at our website, charliecrimebuster.com. If you'd like to reach out with a shout out to either James or myself, just reach us at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, go right on over there to peacemakernetwork.com. You can become a part of those people that are supporting the brave men and women of law enforcement, first responders, and the military. Hope you take a look at that, folks. I think you'll find something there that you can get a hold of and, do something positive in this world by showing support to these brave people. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, should we get down to it, James?
We should get down to it, but first I just wanted to bring to our listeners' attention the fact that we just had a Georgia shooting in Winder, Georgia. Appalachian High School, 4 were killed, 9 were wounded. 2 teachers and 2 students were the victims of this 14-year-old student that brandished an AK and killed them. So we want our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of those that were lost today.
Yeah, what a tragedy it is. It's always tragedy when people lose their life like this, but when it hits our schools, it just hits us. It hits us in a very special place, because you would think that kids should be able to go to school and learn without worrying about somebody coming in and shooting the school up, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's very sobering. In fact, we live in a day and age when we used to be able to go to school, walk to school safely, and then not have to worry. And our parents never had to worry if we were coming home or not. We could actually attend after school activities and not have to worry about, being abducted on the way home with, all this child and the victim trafficking that's going on. So, yeah, we live in a crazy, crazy world these days.
No doubt about it, James. No doubt about it. It is a dangerous world out there, and we need to teach our young people to be safe and to be diligent. And of course, like we say on the program so often, if you see something, say something.
That's right.
Because I'll guarantee you this shooter, I don't know anything about him other than what you've said tonight about this shooting. I did read something about it real quickly, but I guarantee you he went through those stages that we tell people about. There was a time that he planned it. There was a time that he prepared it. He procured the weapon. He went through all those stages. And if somebody could have seen him in those early stages, he could have stopped the mass shooting. So folks, if you see something, say something.
See something, say something. Well, speaking of Karen Reed, why this case now?
Well, first of all, it is a mystery. Our folks love mysteries. And when I say it's a mystery, it's a mystery because it has not been solved yet.
Exactly.
And anything that's not been solved is that area. Another thing, this is quite a divisive a case that we're looking on, because there are a whole group of people on both sides of this
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
really up there in Boston. There's a great divide, and and not only in Boston, but this case is one of those that caught the attention of the world, and so the whole world, many people are divided on it. So we thought it would be very good for us to take a look at it, and also it's an ongoing, developing story. Even this week, I've heard news on this case,
Hmm.
and I
Right.
mentioned I mentioned it's like that thing, where you pull one thread and it just unravels,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's
You-
the kind of
you-
that's the kind of story our people like, and that's the kind of story we like to report on, right?
right, right. Yeah, I like the way you started the podcast. That about grabbing one thread and then it starts to unravel. Yeah, that's actually a good, very good point, because that's actually what's going on in this particular instance. We have a
No
situation
doubt
where
about it.
we don't know the outcome yet. It's still too
That's
many
true. Yep,
unknowns, you
yep.
know?
No doubt about that. No doubt about that.
Well, what did you mean by the opening statement? Move curves than more curves than a Smoky Mountain roadway. What
Well,
in the world is that all
I,
about?
I can say that, James, because I was raised in the hills of Tennessee, and I laugh at these troopers and these sheriff's deputies and police officers here in Florida, because, man, I mean, I've had defensive driving, they've had this defensive driving, we've all been involved in pursuits, but these guys down here in Florida, man, it's just a flat surface,
It
James.
is.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere we turn, what is a straight line,
That's
right?
right. Straight
Look at
lines.
I-4, straight line.
Straight line.
Look at I-95. Look at all just a straight line to the ocean.
That's right.
Our peninsula, straight line.
Yeah.
But up in the hills of Tennessee, we do not have straight lines. We have a lot of curves. I actually hold a record, James. I'm pretty proud of. In our department, I had the longest pursuit recorded, which was an hour and 45 minutes. And that's a
Wow.
long time to pursue.
Yeah.
But while I was in pursuit, this guy took me into another county, another jurisdiction, and went over a mountain. Now, get this, called Wind Rock Mountain.
Windrock
And
Mountain.
yeah, it's just as mountainous as the Smoky Mountains, only they don't have those signs up that says curve up ahead. They don't have those signs that says there's a
Falling
several
rock.
hundred feet drop off here. And I didn't know where I was, and I was just following this. I'm telling you, James, if this guy had gone off the cliff, guess what?
You'd
I
have
would have
gone
gone
with him.
right behind him. And
Oh
that's
my.
that's that's why I said that's what this case is all about.
Yeah.
We don't really know where it's going to lead us. We're
Right.
just
Right.
following it. We do not know the outcome of this case yet.
Right.
That's why it's an exciting case for us.
Well, what do we know that happened up to this point?
Well, what we know that happened was that there were two people, Karen Reed, which is the title that we talked about, Karen
Hmm.
Reed,
Hmm.
cop girlfriend, our cop killer. Her and John O'Keefe were out one night, going from one bar to the bar, having a night out, if you please. They ran into some of their friends there at one of the bars, and then they decided to have what they call an after party. And they went over to this friend's house. She says that she wasn't feeling good, so she dropped him off and she went on home. Well, early in the next morning, she found that John O'Keefe, this Boston cop, did not come home, and she was concerned for him. So she called up some friends. They went back to that place where the party was, and they found a dead cop. They found John O'Keefe's body lying in the snow.
Hmm.
Now, that's what happened. The real challenge is how did he get there? And there is a difference of opinion on how he got there.
Hmm. Well, tell us about the people that are involved.
Well, first of all, there is John O'Keefe.
He's the victim, right? Okay.
He was a deceased. He's a 16-year veteran of the Boston PD. Has a great record, as far as I can tell, of his law enforcement experience. And something interesting I thought also was he was a young man. Well, young man. He was in his 50s when this happened, but he was a guy who certainly was prepared to do the job. He actually had a master's in
Wow.
criminal justice. But beyond his police work, beyond his background, I think there's some very important things, and we did not bring this out in the podcast. That's why people ought to always take advantage of our YouTube channel. We always bring some more flavor to
Right,
it.
right.
John O'Keefe, his sister, tragically was died, and her husband died, and he actually took their children to raise for himself.
Oh, wow.
And you know, for 10 years, over 10 years, he raised those young children. And not only that, but I also just heard recently that his partner, unfortunately, and you know, this is why we say Peacemaker Network is so important,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of mental stress that law enforcement and first responders go through,
Oh, yeah.
and suicide unfortunately is very high among law enforcement. And his partner actually committed suicide. But
Wow.
what John did is that he stepped up to the plate, became a friend to his partner's children, a godfather to them, and also stood by, you know, his widow and family, and just surrounded. It seems like just all this guy did was to pour out his own support and love to others. And such a tragedy that this guy who was so loving, so much a part of the community, and a good officer, it died very much too young, and that he died this way. I mean, you would think, you know, you would be concerned that maybe, you know, he would die out there on the street, but he dies after going to a party one night, and that's really tragic.
Well,
Now,
what do we know
yeah,
about the killing up to this point?
let's talk about the other person too. We don't want to leave Karen Reed
Okay.
out,
Okay. Gotcha.
because you
Gotcha.
know she's a part of this story, very big part of the
That's
story
true.
actually.
That's true.
Karen Reed, she was his girlfriend. She was also raised in Massachusetts. Also, I understand that she spent some time in Blacksburg, Virginia, and she was actually a college had a college degree, was very very skilled in the area of finance, and was a financial analysis. And it appears that she was very successful, because as we look at this story, she's driving around in a Lexus SUV. That's not cheap, right?
No. Wow.
She ended up hiring one of the best attorneys in the country, and that's not cheap. So apparently, she was very, very successful. So Karen Reed was his girlfriend, and she unfortunately has been charged in his death. And then there's a couple of other people that I think also that's important to look at, and one is the name Brian Albert. He was the officers that they went to Sergeant Brian Albert's home after that was where the after party was, James,
Okay.
and he's brought into this thing too, because there, you know, there's two different sides of the story. The prosecution says that he died because she backed into him or hit him with a car, and the defense says no, he went to that party and somebody beat him up and threw him out in the snow, and that he died that way. So you got to bring a lot of other characters into it, including Brian Albert and his family, and they're all very much a part of this story.
Interesting. Wow. So, what do we know about his death? I mean, why is it that she's being charged for his death? If the, I mean, what is she being? What crime did she commit? Should I say?
Well, she was. There were three charges against her. One was second degree murder, which is a pretty strong charge in this setting. Second degree murder, and the other one was, of course, leaving the scene of an accident, and another one was causing the death of someone while intoxicated. And so those were the three charges that was actually levied against her. And they went to court on those charges, and those charges were heard. The prosecution side, the defense side was heard, and as a result of that trial, it deadlocked. The jury could not come to any conclusion, and so there was a mistrial declared. And now we're all thinking about the next trial that's coming up the pike.
Interesting. Wow. So, what did you mean when you said about the cops closing rank?
Well, you know, I tried to explain this to our listeners. Cops always close rank, and there's a reason why that happens. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's bad. And I actually kind of use an illustration like gravity. Gravity is just a fact. I mean, I can say I don't believe in gravity, but I still can't jump more than 100 feet up in the air,
Yep.
because gravity is real.
Right.
Well, like it or not, cops always close rank. And there's a reason because of that, James, because when you're out there on the street, when you're out there in a high stressful position where anytime somebody could be going for your life, then you depend upon those other men and women that are out there with you.
Right.
And when you depend upon men and women out there with you who are literally willing, and I was willing, and anybody I know that puts the badge on is willing to put your life in danger to save your fellow officer, that creates a very, very strong bond.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, even use a scripture in the Bible that says, greater love has no man than willing to lay down his life for the other.
Right.
And yet with police officers, with cops out there, with the military out there, that's exactly what happens. There are men and women who are willing to lay down their life for each other. And when that happens, you get very close together, and it's only very natural that you bond together and you want to protect one another. Now that, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. It can help you stay alive out there, but it can be bad if you band together in such a way that you begin to cover up real crime.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question in this case is this idea of cops all banding together, is it a good thing that they're banding together to make sure that justice is done for their fellow officer, John O'Keefe, or is it a bad thing that they're trying to cover up some nefarious activity that was involved in his death? And that's where the real question is. That's what this case is all about.
Right.
Is this a cover up, or is it just as simple as the fact that she, whether she realized it or not, whether she did it intentionally or not, did she just back into him and cause his death, or was there something else going on? And so when we talk about cops, banding together, closing ranks is what the terminology I use. It is certainly something that happens all the time.
So the gentleman that was hosting the party,
yes,
he was also an officer.
Oh yes, he was, right? Yeah.
So
he was a sergeant.
He was a sergeant. And what was
and you understand that I mean, this wasn't it wasn't altogether strange that they were all hanging around together, because that's what happens. There's a term for it, James, and you'll probably get a kick out of this. It's called choir practice. It's called choir practice,
right?
And the term is, you've been on a shift, you've been there for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, and so you've had a lot of mixed emotions during those 10 and 12 hours. You've gone up and down the spectrum. That's why it's so stressful. You can have hour after hour of boredom, and suddenly you're fighting for your life. And so when that happens, you sometimes need to wind down. And so officers often, at the end of their shift, would go to a bar or some place they would go to, and they would all come together and they would talk about the day. And they could talk about the day among each other because they understand what each other's going through. You can't just talk about that to a civilian, because a civilian can never really understand what's happening out there unless they've been in their shoes. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes cops do this. Now, I also did some work as a chaplain with a police department, and in talking to them, we would encourage our officers to make sure they don't develop what is called tunnel vision, to where all the people you associate with is only a cop. Mm-hmm. All you see is that way. That's very unhealthy. You need to have a little balance there in it.
Right.
But it wasn't uncommon at all for these officers all to go out together that night and to be together. And it wasn't uncommon for the sergeant who worked alongside them to say, hey, come over to my house for an after party. And that's exactly what happened.
Got it. So, what was this crazy crook story all about again?
We love our crazy crook stories, don't we?
Oh man.
Yeah. This is the one that we did this last episode was called the meth mess. The meth mess, He was a guy that unfortunately and boy, we laugh about this. I don't mean to laugh about the fact of what meth does to people, man. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible drug.
Right.
It's very addictive and it's very, very harmful. I mean, and we've all seen meth heads out there, and it just really takes a toll on their life. But it also, I said in the podcast, if you do get involved in meth, don't be surprised if you don't end up on Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook roster.
Exactly.
And this guy exactly did. He was passed out in his car in front of a video store in the parking lot. And I can't tell you how many times as an officer I walked up on people that were either asleep, passed out in the car, and all that sort of thing. Occasionally, it was a guy who just tired and trying to get a shut eye, but that wasn't very often. It was usually somebody drunk or having some kind of drug episode. But this guy was startled to wake up to the popo there, and they asked for his ID. And this crazy crook, instead of handing them the ID, he's reached in his pocket, handed him a whole bag of meth and a whole bunch of money. And so it kind of made it easy for the cops, He thought he was handing him his ID. Instead, he was handing him drugs and money. And you can rest assured what happened next was that he got arrested. And guess what happened to that money?
Yeah, it goes into the pot.
That's right. Yeah, it was confiscated.
Confiscated.
So watch out, folks.
That's right.
Stay away from that meth, or you too will end up on Charlie Crimebuster's roster of crazy crooks, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It was a good. It was a very, very good crazy crook story. I couldn't believe he actually pulled that out of his pocket instead of his ID. I heard that. I'm going, wow, that's real lame. Either he knew he was caught and was over with, or he just he didn't have any cognition of what he was doing.
Yeah.
So back to Karen Reed. What happened at the trial thus far?
Well, they had the trial, and oh boy, I mean, and we're going to get into that in some of the coming episodes because we're not through with this story. But they had it, and there was a whole lot of witnesses, 9 weeks of the trial. And then the jury came through, and they basically, after deliberating, interesting enough, now we know that according to some of the jurors, they all were unanimous, according to the reports, of her being not guilty of 2 of the charges. That would be the one of second-degree murder and also the charge of leaving the scene of an accident. But they were deadlocked on the 3rd charge of causing the death by intoxication. Mm-hmm. So they were deadlocked, and so they came back to the judge, said we're deadlocked, and they declared a mistrial. Now, the defense since then has petitioned the court to go ahead and drop those 2 charges. However, the judge just ruled, and this is just new stuff, this recently, the judge just ruled that no, it was like the Rust trial was dismissed with prejudice. This one was not dismissed with prejudice. Therefore, they have the right to try her again. And so she will be tried again. And I believe she will be tried again. I don't believe they're going to drop the charges because there's a cop that's dead, Right. There's a pillar of the community that has died, and somebody needs to seek justice for John O'Keefe.
Yep. So what's next?
Now, you're not going to, well, what's next? Actually, we're going to get more involved in this. Some people are trying to get me to say now, what do I believe really happened? And I said, nope, you're not going to catch me there. They're not going to hear that too at the end of our series, right? We're going to put that teaser there, right?
That's right.
I'm not going to tell you how I feel and what happened yet. I'll let you make that decision, folks. You that are listening, you can decide what you think took place, and we're going to give you a lot of information for you to make that decision. And I will tell you before we before we get to the end of the series of exactly what I took place. But what's coming next on the podcast is we're going to give you a more realistic timeline of what really happened. We're going to talk about, interesting enough, the lead prosecutor, the lead investigator, the Massachusetts State Police, a guy by the name of Michael Proctor, has actually now been suspended without pay. And so, there is a question of police corruption tied to this story. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, was the corruption that was involved, that Michael Proctor that was involved in, was that him trying to cover up something else that happened? Or was he just, stepping out of line, using poor judgment and not being professional? We're gonna tell folks all about that so they can see why there was a second investigation alongside this investigation that actually was investigating the Canton Police Department. And I think we're going to find some really, really interesting stuff involved in that. We're going to talk about the evidence, and we're going to give you evidence that demands a verdict. We're going to give you evidence that the prosecution introduced. We're going to give you evidence that the defense introduced. And all of that is going to help you make that choice of what you think really happened to John O'Keefe.
Wow. So how did he really die?
Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Was it hypothermia, or because you mentioned in the podcast that there was some bruising and there was fracture?
I can tell you how he died. I can tell you how he died, but I can't tell you why he died. I tell you why he died. I can't tell you how he died. That's the way it is.
Okay.
He did have a blunt force to his head. And but hypothermia was a part of it as well, and there's a lot of controversy about that because the defense is saying that the type of injuries that he had is not consistent with her simply backing into him. There's even wounds on his arm that one defense expert actually testified that had the same marks as one who was bit by a dog.
Wow.
And something interesting, getting back to Brian, Albert.
Mm-hmm.
Now listen to this, James. Right after this case started, Brian Albert got rid of his phone. He got rid of his phone before the defense could get to it and look and see what's on his phone. Remember, you and I talk about that digital footprint, right?
Yep, digital footprint. Absolutely.
He got rid of it, wiped it clean. Not only did he get rid of his phone, he got rid of his house. He sold his house. But not only did he get rid of his house, he got rid of his dog.
Boy.
So he got rid of his house, he got rid of his phone, he got rid of his dog. But the question is, did he get rid of his house because, hey, man, some bad stuff happened there and I don't want to stay around it? Or was he trying to, get away from something,
Wow.
Did he get rid of his dog because he's afraid his dog bites somebody else? Or was he afraid that his dog would be tied to the death of John O'Keefe?
Right.
So, some really, really interesting things coming down the pike about this.
So Brian Albert sells his house, his dog, and he also gets rid of his phone. So now there's probable cause there.
Well, I guess it's a consciousness of guilt, or what,
Why haven't they brought charges up against him? Why isn't he standing trial?
It's not against the law to sell your house, right? Anybody can sell their house
after a crime.
Yeah, well, crime did, according to the investigators, they're saying that the house was not a crime scene, that he died in the yard, that whatever happened in the yard. 11 witnesses said he never went into that house. So the house would not be a crime scene. And the crime scene, of course, was keep in mind, this happened in 2022, right? So, that crime scene was already processed. So, there wasn't anything illegal that Brian Albert did, but it does lead one to question why. Why did he get rid of the house? Why did he get rid of his phone? Why did he get rid of his dog? And nothing illegal about that. But why did it? Was there something more to it? But at the same time, James, it really could come down to the fact that it was just simply she hit him with a car.
Mm-hmm.
There was a broken cocktail glass found around him. There was, they say, glass that's consistent with a broken taillight on her vehicle that was found with him.
Was her vehicle also found to have a broken lens?
Yes, or cracked lens. Cracked lens. Yeah, there was also a text that night between the two that to kind of showed that things weren't going well between the two. That there was some some conflict there. So I mean, it could be just as simple the fact that she hit him accidentally or unintentional.
Interesting.
Or is it? Look at all the other stuff.
Yeah.
The other stuff that comes to it. That some people said that his wounds were not consistent with a car hitting him. There's just so many experts that are on both sides of this. This really makes this case a real whodunit.
Yeah.
That's why this is such an interesting case.
Wow, this is a real true crime mystery.
No doubt about it. The folks got to stay tuned for next week, right?
That's right. Stay tuned. There's more to come.
More to come. And by the way, let's also let the folks know that they want to. We got a lot of great series out there. I mean, if you like to get into a case like this and follow it all the way to the end, just go to charliecrimebuster.com. We have a whole bunch of series there of different cases, all the way, well. Actually, the last one we just finished was what was happening with Trump. And then we also, had the college killings in Idaho.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Gabby Petito.
And man, just a bunch of them out there,
Yep. There's 212 episodes out there on charliecrimebuster.com.
And we've done a number of these series because people like series,
Yeah, they do. Yep. A lot of series.
So James, tell them where they can find us so that they want to look us up anywhere and get involved in some of the stuff we have on media. And we will tell these folks thank you for listening, and we'll join them next week, right?
All right. Yeah. You can find us at charliecrimebuster.com. That's like we just mentioned before. You can also reach out to us on our Facebook page at Charlie Crimebuster. You can also go to Twitter, which is now x.com, and it's C_Crimebuster. C stands for Charlie, of course, C_Crimebuster. So you can find us there. And you can also find us at peacemakerNetwork.com, where you can become a badge, BADGE, supporter of our first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel for as little as $3 a month, which is less than a penny a day. So please join us and help us support those that are suffering from PTSD and also suicide prevention as well. Also, if you want to lodge any complaints or you want to lodge any feedback to us, whatever you want, whatever you have to say, you can go to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, and we will respond.
Yeah, we call it reach out with a shout out.
Reach out with a shout out. That's right.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you all next week. So until this time, next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, stay safe, stay alert. Yep. For the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.